With Canadians heading to the polls in September, this got me thinking, do elections impact real estate in Canada? And what are the parties promising to do to address the housing crisis we currently have in Canada? Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Prairie Real Estate, where I educate you all about real estate. If you're new here, my name is Matthew Pfeiffer. I'm a real estate agent from Regina, Saskatchewan. Before we get into looking at the impact of the election will have on the real estate market and grading the election promises made by the different parties, let's start off with another terrible joke. I was wondering, why do they call it emotional baggage? Why not a grief case? If you have a terrible joke I can use in a future episode of Prairie Real Estate, put it in the comments below. I expect Canadian housing to be a hot issue in this election, so I've gone through the party platforms, looked at all their different promises, and graded their housing strategy as a whole. I've looked at the major parties that have the most likely chance of forming government, or that could have a major role in a minority parliament. And not all parties have a housing strategy, so I can't grade those ones. Of course, things may change as the campaign continues along, but I gotta go with the information that's available today. The Liberals have a plan to do a 1% foreign buyer's tax on property that is vacant. I think this is very much sounding like you're doing something without actually really doing anything. If somebody can afford to buy a property and leave it vacant, a 1% annual tax, that's just the cost of doing business. I don't think this dissuades that many people from buying a property and leaving it vacant if they have the resources to do it, especially if a property is appreciating at 5, 10, 15, 20% in a year. 1% doesn't make much of a difference. The next thing they'd like to do is reallocate and add additional funds to get 35,000 homes either refurbished or built. Even if they built 35,000 brand new homes, that's only 1.7% of that deficit where we have 1.8 million homes we need to build. So this isn't really gonna make much of a difference. It's gonna sound like they're doing something, but really not have a major impact on the Canadian housing market. Lastly, they'd like to allocate about $300 million to building affordable rental properties. Now, they're not building the entire project. This is just additional funds for projects that are going to be built. And $300 million sounds like a lot of money, but that's only gonna build you probably 3,000 to 5,000 additional rental properties, the $300 million alone. I'm not sure exactly how much it's going to build when these are just sprinkled everywhere to start projects all over the place, but that's not a lot of money to get a ton of rental supply into the market. In addition to their election promises, the Liberal Party also implemented when they were in government in 2019, the first-time home buyers incentive program, where they would top up a home buyer's down payment 5% on a residential resale property and 10% on a brand new property. But this didn't help anybody qualify for a mortgage if you didn't already qualify. All it did was reduce your payments, and then when you go to sell that property, you had to pay back that amount, so it was basically just a loan. It wasn't a grant or anything like that. So they've got that in addition to what they've promised. Overall, the Liberal Party's housing strategy, to me, is playing lip service to the problem without really doing anything to address the root causes. They're not increasing supply in any sort of meaningful way and not really reducing barriers to first-time homebuyers getting into the market. That's why I've given the Liberal Party's housing platform a D-. The Conservatives would like to see 1 million new homes built within 3 years. Now they're going to do this by taking federal buildings and land and converting 15% of it back to housing. So this is something that is actionable and measurable, and we can hold the politicians to account if they don't hit that million house target that they have set for themselves. They have also outlined a plan to adjust down payment and mortgage default insurance requirements. So quick refresher here, if you're purchasing a home over $1 million, you have to have at least 20% down. Now, these rules were set decades ago when $1 million house was an extreme luxury home. Nowadays, in some markets, that's just the average house. And having over $200,000 as a down payment is an obvious barrier to entry for buyers. So what they're looking to do here is change that and then fix it to inflation. So as house prices go up, those down payment requirements will go up. Being able to put just 5% down changes your down payment on that $1 million house from $200,000 to $50,000. That is, of course, a significant reduction in the barrier to entry for first-time home buyers. Next, they'd like to ban foreign buyers from buying houses in Canada for 2 years. Now, this is one of those things where it looks really good in a campaign and it sounds awesome, something a lot of people may feel that this is important, but the data doesn't really support this being a massively important measure to do. Yes, foreign buyers are a part of the Canadian housing market. Are they a massive part? Well, the numbers that I have been able to find show between 4 and about 8% of homes nationally are owned by foreign nationals. So that's an important factor, but there are far more significant measures that could be taken, or this approach could be done differently, that I think would have a bigger impact. The last major policy the Conservatives have is creating a national registry of home ownership. Now, again, this is one of those things that's going to sound really good on the campaign trail. A lot of people may think this is fantastic. This will really help identify money laundering and foreign nationals buying properties and everything like that. Again, sounds great, but for the most part, it already exists. Most provinces have a land title system that anybody can search. You pay the fee and you can pull the title information. Who owns the property? When did they buy it? Who do they get their mortgage through? All that type of information, for the most part, is already public knowledge. Having a national registry, okay, that might make it more transparent, but it really isn't going to change things that much. The Conservative Housing Strategy talks about addressing supply and how supply is a significant issue in Canada, and they also have measures to reduce barriers so that first-time home buyers can get into the market easier. And they're going to get extra bonus points because they stole my tagline about Canada's housing crisis. I've already done that video talking about the lack of supply in Canada. I put the link in the description below so you can check that out, how important this issue is and how few homes we really do have in Canada. I'll put a card up here somewhere too, you can check that out. But I'm going to give the Conservatives a B- for this plan. There's some great things that are actionable and measurable. There's also some populist ideas that are going to sound really good on the campaign trail, but they don't really do that much, or some of these things already exist. The NDP has a fairly comprehensive housing strategy, and the first thing they want to do is have 500,000 homes built in the next 10 years, and 50% of those in the first 5 years. 500,000 homes is of course going to make a big dent in the lack of supply in Canada, although the time frame I think is a little long. Having 500,000 homes built in 5 years and half of it done in the first 2.5 years, I think that would be a more aggressive and more needed goal, but they do have a plan to address supply. They're going to provide fast start funds and streamline the application process. This sounds really good in theory, but the federal government doesn't have or has very little to do with the municipal government's zoning and application process, so I'm not really sure how they plan to achieve this other than trying to cooperate with municipal governments to get it done. They want to implement a 20% foreign buyers tax, and this is actually a tax that's gonna have some bite. I think it's a really good compromise between completely barring foreign buyers purchasing homes in Canada while still giving Canadians a significant advantage when purchasing homes within Canada. So I kind of like the balance they've struck here, and it's a tax with some serious bite. Another good idea they have is no GST on the construction of rental properties. I wish this would be extended to all properties until we get a significant increase in supply, but this will at least help out the rental market. Another thing they would like to implement is 30-year amortizations for first-time homebuyers. So right now, it's 25-year amortizations unless you have 20% down, then you can go to 30 years. This will lower monthly payments and make it a little bit easier for those first-time homebuyers to get into the market. I don't know if it's a great plan. 30-year amortization now means that you're paying this off longer, paying more in interest, and when you go to sell that home, and the average first-time homebuyer typically is only in their house for about 5 to 8 years, they've got less equity because they've been paying less down with that longer amortization period. So I'm not really a big fan of this, but it is going to help buyers get into the market. They want to double the first-time home buyer's tax credit from $750 to $1,500. And hey, I'll take $1,500 back anytime I can. I'm not really sure how this helps those in tough markets and expensive markets get into buying a house a little bit easier, but hey, I'll take $1,500. They want to have CMHC-backed mortgages for co-ownership situations. They don't really detail out what exactly they're meaning in this promise. I actually wish they would. It would be interesting. All that they've said is they want to help innovative and new ways for home ownership, and they're going to do it through CMHC, but they don't really outline how they're going to do it. Just like the Conservatives, they would like to have a public registry for home ownership. And like I said in the Conservative section, this kind of already exists. Most provinces have some form of land titles registry where the homeowner's name, how much their mortgage was, how much they paid, all that information is publicly available as long as you pay the fee. So, like I said in the Conservative section, I guess having it all together in one accessible site makes it a little bit easier, more transparent. This is going to sound good on the campaign trail because they're going to talk about how this is going to help with money laundering. And that was another element they talked about, was strengthening the checks and all that stuff in place for money laundering. Well, already the mortgage broker, the real estate agent, and the lawyer have to go through FinTrack legislation and go through all the verification process. So I'm not really sure what changes they're going to make that already aren't done. But improving transparency and removing money laundering, I'll get behind that. The NDP does have a comprehensive housing strategy. They looked at ways to address the supply problems, reduce money laundering, reduce foreign ownership, things like that. I think those are all good ideas, although I actually wish they would take some of these ideas even further. The 20% on the foreign buyers, I think that's a good plan. It's a good balance between allowing home ownership and banning it out completely. Although I do wish that they would address more aggressively the lack of supply in Canada, so I'm giving the NDP a C-. When you're talking to candidates, be it at your front door or at a function, ask them how they and their party are going to address this housing crisis we have in Canada. And don't let them give you the talking point answers. Ask for answers that are executable and that are measurable so you can hold those politicians to account for their actions. Because in Canada, we need 1.8 million homes to be built just to have the average of the G7. We don't have enough houses in Canada. And having populist plans, well, those sound great, but sounding great and actually having an executable plan, that's two very different things. So have them give you concrete details and make sure this is an important issue that you bring up with those candidates, because we have to address this issue. Now, if you want a deeper dive into this Canadian housing crisis, I've got right here, part 1 in my series of videos. We're talking in that video about the lack of inventory of homes in Canada. And right here, this is my most recent Canadian housing market update, looking at the major real estate markets in Canada, giving you an in-depth look at that. As always, thanks very much for watching.